Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Together We Build Public Spaces virtual town hall. This is the final in our 11-part series looking at different program-specific areas of planning for the new Windsor-Essex Acute Care Hospital. Before we begin tonight, let's respectfully acknowledge that the Windsor Regional Hospital occupies the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Nishnawbe, Iskoden, Anishinaabe, the Three Fires Confederacy, Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi. We acknowledge the land and the surrounding waters for sustaining us, and we are committed to protecting and restoring these lands and waters from environmental degradation. On behalf of the project management team overseeing stage 2 planning for the new hospital, we are pleased to welcome everyone tonight joining us via Zoom webinar. I'm Allison Johnson, Manager of Communications and Community Engagement for the project, and your moderator for tonight's conversation. Tonight, you will have the opportunity to meet some members of the user group designing the public spaces in the new hospital, learn about some of the work that they're doing, and ask questions. To ask a question at any point during tonight's conversation, click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and type in your question. We'll do our best to answer all of your questions at the end of tonight's presentation. Please note the focus of this town hall is stage 2 planning of public spaces. So this includes the physical structure, design, layout, and location of the lobby, hallways, elevators, food, retail, and spiritual care areas. It also includes technologies that you'll find in these spaces. To maintain the flow and focus of this conversation, please ensure that your questions are related to this topic. Following tonight's conversation, we also invite you to visit our engagement platform at togetherwebuild.wrh.on.ca to ask any further questions you have, take our surveys, share your ideas, and let us know what you would like this team to consider when they're planning public spaces. So now I want to introduce you to tonight's panel guests. Everyone, please say hello to Mark Fathers, Vice President of Corporate Services, Monica Stanton, Director of Support Services, Steve Irwin, Director of Public Affairs and Communications, Faith Nesdoli, she's a consultant with Agnew Peckham Healthcare Planning and has been working closely with this group, Jeff Gemmell, Director of Support Services Planning for the new hospital, and Paul Landry, Project Director for the new Windsor-Essex Acute Care Hospital. Thanks everyone for being with us tonight. Before we begin tonight's conversation, I want to talk for a minute about where we're at in the planning process. The capital planning process for building a new hospital is 5 stages. We are in stage 2. If you take a look at this chart that we've prepared, you'll see we started functional programming earlier this year. The functional program is a very detailed planning document that describes future services, activity volumes, staffing levels, new technologies, and space requirements. So since the beginning of the year, about 40 user groups representing different hospital programs and services have been working closely with Agnew Peckham consultants as well as patient representatives to complete this step. So as you can see in the chart, they're about halfway through this process. And when they're finished, they'll work with a team of architects and engineers who will use the functional program to create block schematic plans for the building. These are early plans that show how the rooms will be organized throughout the hospital and what other programs and services will be located nearby. So this is both horizontally, what other services are located nearby, as well as vertically. So what is directly above and below each of these rooms. So these will be completed by late fall. A revised cost estimate is also part of stage 2. You can see that that takes place later this year. And then everything will be submitted to the ministry in the early part of next year. So in stage 3, we get into some more detailed planning and design development so that we're ready to take the project to market, and that happens in stage 4. In this stage, a detailed process is used to select the developer to further the design and complete the project. The final stage is construction. And if all goes well, we should see the first patient in the new hospital by 2030. So again, all of that to say, we're still in the early stages of planning, but it is really important to leadership and to all of those at the planning tables that we do have this opportunity to check in with all of you and do so regularly, that we have the opportunity to share project highlights, to get your input, So really thank you everyone for being here with us tonight. And with that, I think you've heard enough from me. Let's bring Jeff Gemmell into this conversation. So Jeff, it seems like a pretty important area that we're talking about, areas that everyone coming into the hospital, whether you're a patient, staff, visitors, vendors, everyone's coming through these public spaces. So what exactly are we talking about when we discuss public spaces, and how does this all fit into the bigger planning picture in the new hospital?
Thanks, Allison. And, first, I just want to echo what you said and thank everyone for participating tonight because we truly value and appreciate the feedback. You mentioned we have approximately 40 different groups working on functional program planning, and they're all equally important. However, this group here tonight that focuses on public spaces has the unique impact that it impacts every single person who enters the hospital. Public spaces can be a very broad topic, but it largely involves non-clinical areas where patients and families may find themselves within the hospital. The lobby is a great example. We're working to ensure we have a warm and welcoming entrance that is easy to navigate. We're working with our volunteer team to develop a model where you can be greeted and assisted upon arrival. Everything starts in the main lobby and sets the tone for your experience in the hospital. Other public spaces we're looking at, include hallways, retail spaces, entry and drop-off zones, navigation, just to name a few. The focus is on creating a patient and visitor-friendly environment that helps people and shows them comforts and amenities within the hospital. So a lot of the other groups are focusing on the clinical areas, the support service areas, but this one is really focused on those amenities and those comforts that everybody experiences regardless of the reason why you're at the hospital. So it's a really important group and one that we really need and value the feedback from our community.
Thanks, Jeff. And I want to remind everyone throughout the conversation, please post any questions that you have for this team in the Q&A section, and we will get to them at the end of tonight's conversation. Mark, over to you. Can I get you to share with us what is the vision for this group when planning public spaces at the new hospital?
Yeah, thank you, Allison. And it's my pleasure to be here tonight. Some of my comments are going to be very similar to what the points Jeff raised. I like to use this analogy. If you look at a hospital for a moment, remove the patient care services that we provide. The underlying services are very similar of providing the accommodations, housekeeping, food services, and concierge are similar to a hotel. When you go to a hotel, when you walk through the front door, that first impression you get when you walk in, I think sets the expectations for that room you're going to be going up to and staying, going there. So if you have a clean, inviting lobby, good chances your room is going to be very similar. So as part of the design for the new acute care hospital, we want to ensure, as Jeff indicated, that our facility is a very inviting space. Later on in the presentation, you're going to see, I think, what those spaces could look like. Our other goal is to ensure public spaces are generous enough, as Jeff said, to make one feel very comfortable, not overcrowded, and wherever you need to go, it's only a short distance away and easy to find.
Sounds great. And I like the idea of working toward a first impression. Steve, a question for you. In order to achieve that goal that Mark set out there, what are some of the important items that your team has to consider when designing these spaces?
Well, thanks, Allison. I was reflecting on that in thinking about my time before I moved to Windsor in 2010 to work at a hospital in Windsor. And before that time, there were so many new hospitals that were constructed in the Greater Toronto area. And you'd walk into these lobbies and they would be spacious, and there was a sense of calmness and a feeling that you were somewhere for healing, right? Which is a really good purpose of that kind of space. That you enter those doors in that way. And then when I came to Windsor, my first introduction to hospitals in Windsor was just some surprise at how antiquated a lot of those public spaces can be. And as much as we talk, and I know you've talked with at the other town halls, about how outdated some of our patient care areas have been and how we can improve on those. They weren't designed with today's medical needs in mind, and public spaces weren't designed with today's needs and priorities as well. And I think all of us would agree you want an area that is easy to access, is welcoming, is calming. If you look at our campuses today, particularly Met Campus, it can feel quite cramped as you come in the doorway. more so now with screening because of COVID-19, but even in general, those are tighter spaces than you would want. Wayfinding is something that my public affairs department is often involved in terms of signage around the building and helping navigate and helping get patients to where they need to go and visitors. And anyone who's spent any time at our campuses knows that they can be like a maze. And again, they weren't designed with today's needs in mind. So trying to help someone through the building to get from point A to point B can be really, really challenging. And that's something that I know with the new designs, we're going to be able to address much better. That's a long answer, Allison. The shorter answer that I would have too is I would like more elevators and escalators that work consistently. And anyone that's been on our campuses knows how that can be tricky as well.
Yes, and sometimes you're taking an elevator up 3 stairs only. So that is important. And that actually leads into my question for Monica. Monica, over the years, you and I have talked many times about what is important to have in a new hospital, but also that just as important as what you see when you come into the hospital is what you don't see. So I'm going to get you to talk a little bit about that. What will we not see in the new hospital?
Hi, Allison. Thank you. And I just want to say I'm really excited to be here. Allison and I have been working for a number of years on this, so it's really exciting to see this come to fruition and start to talk to people in the community, because that's the purpose of these town halls, because we really want to get your feedback. So just what Allison was mentioning is what will we not see? So one of the things at our current hospitals, which can be very disturbing for our patients, is that our patients share the elevator with the visitors. So you might go up the elevator and your neighbor's in the elevator coming to visit his mother in the hospital, and you really didn't want anybody to know that you were in the hospital. So now all of a sudden, just because you have to share the elevator, then that people know about that. So we are going to have a separate bank of elevators for the public, and then a bank of elevators that will be taking the garbage up and down in those elevators. We won't be sharing that with the public or patients. We'll be taking linen up and down those elevators. So we're going to have what we call front of the house, which is the public areas or the patient areas, and then we'll have back of the house. And those are all the support services that we do. And Mark touched on it, that it's almost like a hotel, and we actually call our department guest services, because that's what we're here for. We're trying to improve the experience for the patient, so that as much as we can, help them to try and not feel like we are in a hospital. So you won't see the big carts of dirty linen going down the hallway, because that'll be in a hallway that will be separated from patients and from the visitors, so that it's you don't see any garbage, anything like that. And we're trying to make the experience for the patient to be as good as we possibly can.
So Monica, it's Mark. So it's just almost like you experience when you go to Disney World, right? You never really see the support services that are there. They're always below ground. So
exactly, it's the same thing. And Disney and the room service that we have for our meal service came from Disney as well. So exactly.
One of the things at one of the hospitals that I had the opportunity to visit when they made that point too, was that just like at Disney, when you never see the characters out of character, it gives the staff an opportunity to have conversations that are not appropriate for public spaces in an area that it is very much appropriate to have those conversations. And, even just to let off some steam or talk about issues that may concern patient privacy. And there is the space to do that, where now I know that it is challenging sometimes to find that space. So thanks, Monica. And we're going to go over to Faith now from Agnew Peckham. And throughout this planning stage, the user groups are working very closely with consultants from Agnew Peckham Healthcare Planning. Agnew Peckham has been part of many of the largest and most recent new hospital projects in Ontario and right across the country, including the new Oakville Trafalgar and the new Humber River Hospital. Faith is going to share some highlights of the work that this group has been doing tonight. And she's also going to show us some trends that her team is seeing in public places when they're being planned at other new hospitals. Faith?
Thank you very much, Allison. For those of you who might be joining, maybe you were perhaps on a women's and children's meeting a couple of weeks ago, you'll see that I've also been working with those teams. And I just want to put you on notice that the first few slides that I will be sharing are repeated across the various programs that I've been working with. So some of you, it won't be new to you. But I'm going to start with an overview of the functional programming process, and then get into the details of what our team is doing. And then I've got a few examples to share with you of some lobby spaces from some other facilities that we've recently worked on. So in terms of just really quickly, as Allison and Mark mentioned earlier, we are in stage 2 of developing the functional program. And the functional program is the words that the architects translate into a design. And so what we try to emphasize in this stage of planning is that form follows function. So we have to describe everything before you can actually build the building. And most recently, a lot of the influence, the healthcare facility planning is driven by change. And most recently, I'm going to say a lot of the impacts have been as a result of infection prevention and control, and some of the pandemic issues that we've seen over the years, from SARS right up on now into COVID. In terms of the overall concept, Jeff mentioned that we've got 40+ planning teams. And so we are going to be describing all the services that are planned at the hospital in different sections. So each program has their own particular section, and talking about the flows, workload, and staffing, adjacencies. I'll talk more about this later. And then we do detailed room lists for all of the departments. The planning timeframes are over 10 and 20 years. So we're planning to 28-29 and then to 38-39. And as also previously mentioned, once we finish this piece of work, the architects will come on board and start developing some block schematics. So they're going to show how the building is put together in concept. Okay. So in terms of the individual programs, we describe the functions or the services that are going to be provided. And I'll talk about some of the concepts that we're working on for the public areas. We talk about the key operational processes, so how staff, patients, and materials flow through the areas and how they do their work and how they get their services. In terms of workload, this is activity. So the current activity, for example, emergency department visits and projected number of visits, or clinic visits, for example. Staffing, how the areas are going to be staffed now and in the future. Then the next section is all about the planning and design requirements. So here we talk about what services need to be close to one another in order to function properly, because different services support each other. For example, emergency department has a very important relationship to diagnostic imaging. We talk about how the spaces need to be organized within a particular area, and then again, the number of rooms that are required and how they're organized within that area. We tend to organize our space lists so that if you're walking into an area, the spaces are listed as how you would walk through that space. And finally, the space allocation, which I just talked about. In terms of some of the trends and planning considerations for the work that we're doing right now, and particularly with our public areas and retail spaces, and just recently, we're more conscious about separating flows and separating entrances to different parts of the hospital. And this is in order to, or the main thrust is to keep as many areas open as possible during a pandemic. So the tendency has been to, and I'll talk about this more again later, but to split the main entrance from your ambulatory entrance, for example, so that if there is in a pandemic situation, you can continue to serve your outpatients, even though you might be restricting access to some of your inpatient areas. We separate staff flow from patient and visitor flow, so providing a separate staff entrance. And then further to that, within each entrance, we separate the flow of people coming into the hospital from those going out of the hospital. And we are planning screening areas at each entrance. So instead of having to set up an ad hoc screening area that you're putting into a potentially currently crowded lobby space, we're planning an empty space that can easily be converted into a screening area when you need it. We talk about connecting the very entrances via Main Street or main streets. And this is a spine that runs through the hospital, and it enhances wayfinding. It provides access between the main areas of the hospital, and it is a place to centrally locate some of our key spaces. So some of our retail areas and other key spaces. As already described, we want to provide a welcoming environment at every entrance. And in addition, and you'll see this in some of the examples that I'll show later, we want to provide flexible space for events at the main entrance. So if there's a staff meeting of a large group of staff or all the staff in the hospital, then it could be a place where people gather in that location to host that event. Some of the key adjacencies to our public areas and retail services is our outpatient registration. So in fact, I'm working with a different group on registration, but we want to make sure that when you walk into an ambulatory or into a main entrance, that you can see right away where you need to register and that it's on the way to the clinic or the service that you're going to. The Indigenous Services Ceremonial Room will be planned in a location that gives it the presence that's required and very close or almost within the public areas. And the same goes for the spiritual care multi-faith room. And we have obviously our main public elevators, and not to forget that we also need easy access to our service elevators or our patient transfer elevators. So these are the things that it's very important when you're coming into the hospital that you're easily finding these areas. In our planning work to date, and some of the work for public areas needs to be done now, but also may perhaps rebalanced when the architects come on board because they're doing the massing for the building. But conceptually right now, we're talking about providing a main entrance, an ambulatory entrance. We'll have a separate cancer care entrance, a separate staff entrance, and a non-emergency transfer entrance. So this is for wheel trans, and other vehicles that are pulling up to pick up or drop off a patient, but they don't require access through the emergency department. And you want to provide them with a more private location than dropping them off at the main entrance, for example. And of course, I haven't mentioned the emergency entrances, but those are obviously included as part of the emergency department planning. Every entrance will include a welcome center. We're planning a satellite security desk in every entrance. And then we have various kiosks for wayfinding, parking, and other services, as well as waiting areas for pickup for patients waiting for pickup. And then there'll be other seating and lounge areas, and perhaps some food and non-food retail locations. So for example, if the hospital is large enough, we might have a Tim Hortons in your main or close to your main entrance, but we might have a little satellite also at one of the other entrances, for example. So we are also including the planning for the food court, and with access to both indoor and outdoor seating. And the thing is, the food court is one of those spaces that we would want to be located centrally on that main street or the main spines of the hospital. So that's easily accessible for all staff, as well as visible to visitors coming into the hospital. We're planning a patient and family or patient and visitor resource center, for example, with online, with support for online education. We're planning retail pharmacy or pharmacies, still being discussed. And this is, they will be located to support the key patient groups, visitors, and staff. So that's just a few of the things that we're including so far. So just some examples of some work that's been done today. This is probably one of the, well, I guess it is the newest hospital in Toronto now. It's the Cordolucci Vaughn Hospital. And these just give you a view of the main entrance here. And you have in a lot of facilities, we're planning a stairway to the second floor. So this shows that that staircase that you can take up to the next level. And of course, stairs going down. So stairs are becoming important feature items in planning, and also to encourage people that don't necessarily need to take an elevator, that stairs are a good option. And you can see here that this is probably a different angle of the reception desk that we have here, and you can see some waiting space beside it. This is Humber River Hospital, and you can also see this is their entrance. Their main lobby is quite different because it's very long, and you have various entry points as you go along. So it's a little bit more difficult, but you can see it in this slide. You can see this C area and then D area. So, but you have a very long corridor. And but you still have, you know, it's got lots of windows. You have the views from the upper level, your information center. This is Oakville Trafalgar, and there's actually a main entrance at both sides. So as if I'm standing at one entrance, I can see through to the other side. But they have a piano there, and that so for special occasions, this space is used for large gatherings, and the auditorium is right adjacent to the area. So the auditorium has a very prominent location on the main level of Oakville Trafalgar, and you can see this is their donor recognition area with some waiting and the main information desk. And just to show you another view, this is their main cafeteria. So you can see the seating area and all surrounded by windows. What I'm not showing a picture of here is the various food venues, but there's 3 or 4 different types of food venues within the cafeteria. There's a Tim Hortons, there's a perhaps I forget, but perhaps a Subway, so other food options within the cafeteria. These pictures are from the Brampton Civic Hospital, and so I just wanted to give you an example to show you a bank of elevators, and this is the signage that they've got associated with the different areas of the hospital. So you can see the coloring fits in with the theme of the sun. These are probably the public elevators, with the service elevators or the patient transfer elevators would be around the other side and not visible from this view. And this is just again another waiting space in their lobby, or lobbies, one of the lobbies. This is the Etobicoke site. So it's their new patient tower. And this is the, again, I forget where the entrance is exactly, but you can see that they've got this staircase going up to the second level and the services on the second level, and information and seating. And this is at the new Peel Memorial site, which is an ambulatory center that again is currently being expanded. And you can see all the bright colors that they've got in their windows. And again, that stair feature is still very prominent. You can see examples here of the welcome center or the information desk, as well as some of the kiosks that they're using for, for directions or looking what room a patient might be in, those kinds of things. Your wheelchairs are nicely stacked away in a little enclosed area. And then you can see that right at the corner there, that's where the gift shop is. And I forgot to mention the gift shop. The gift shop would be another thing, or is another thing that we're planning in our main lobby area. And that brings to a close my presentation. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Faith. It is really neat when you see inside other hospitals and what some look like, and there is such a wide variety in different patient experiences. But I do think this is one of the more, maybe the most fun user group, because you do get to consider all those things right from the front door. Like Mark said, the first impression, as we saw in some of those new hospitals there. So one of the goals of the Together We Build series is to get everyone's feedback. What do hospital users think we should consider when designing public spaces at the new hospital? And right now, we're going to check in with a few individuals who visited Windsor Regional Hospital this week to find out what they think.
I think I'd like to see more family-orientated seating, maybe just like in the hospital, like itself, larger sitting areas for families and visitors, because sometimes we do have family pass away and there's not enough space for the whole family to just sit down and kind of have that grief.
I think more open areas where there's a lot of natural light and just places where people can feel comfortable, while they're waiting for whatever news it is or an appointment, just somewhere comfortable, and it has to be completely accessible as well.
A larger entrance area where people can be greeted and met and find seating, public seating, rather than having to go into an area that people are waiting to be taken care of.
So those are just some of your thoughts. And again, we want to hear from everybody. So in addition to tonight's town hall, we do invite everyone once again to visit our engagement website, togetherwebuild.wrh.on.ca. If you haven't been there, please check it out. You can go there. You can provide input into the design of public spaces, as well as 10 other program areas, including the emergency department, the cancer center, the new pediatrics unit, inpatient units, and there's more still. So, and some of you have been sharing your thoughts in the Q&A section tonight, and we do appreciate that. And we will include all of those in the package that we'll prepare for the user groups after our series is concluded. A lot of the comments in there tonight, and actually throughout this town hall, have to do with green spaces and access to nature. And I remember earlier on in this series, I think it was Dr. Mazzetti said that just a single ray of light can have a world of impact on a patient's recovery. And that really struck with me. I know, Paul, you've talked before about access to nature, greenery in some spaces. Can you comment just a little bit on this? And I know that Paul's been fairly quiet tonight, and you'll see in a second why, but it is really interesting. And so I do invite you just to share as much as you can.
Well, thank you, Allison. Thanks for setting that up a bit. My voice is, of course, not what it usually is. I've been battling a little bit of a cold. It's not from too much talking at these town halls, I don't think. But no, I think it's a good point to raise that, and we're very early on in the planning process, so we haven't gotten to, the landscape strategy and the outdoor spaces. Faith touched on it a bit. With regards to the cafeteria and having not only indoor seating, but outdoor seating, and not just outside of the cafeteria, but next to the cancer center and some other places where we want to, have the patients and public places that they can can retreat to and get some fresh air. And, going to the hospital is obviously a very stressful experience. And we want to de-stress it as much as we can by creating, I think, a welcoming and warm environment internally, but we want to extend that to the outdoors as well. And so in the landscape strategy, months down the road, in stage 3, really, we'll be working with the architects and the landscape architects to look at what we can do with this very large site that we have. Could we create a nice walking path around the perimeter of the site with some stopping places with benches and some gardens? And you can just imagine, family members, kind of stressed over maybe a family member or a relative, in hospital for a serious procedure or an illness, and how useful that would be for them to be able to retreat to a place like that. Not to mention, of course, the staff that are giving it 24/7, caring for patients, and we need them to step out of the building when they take a break and go and get some fresh air and get some exercise like that. So that will come in, subsequent sort of stages of planning.
And I see Steve nodding his head through some of what you're saying. Steve, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I don't think we can understate enough just what that the light and the healing opportunities that come with having those kind of spaces. So from an interior standpoint, I look at all those slides that Faith showed in her presentation and pictures of other hospitals at Humber and Vaughn, and the consistency with all those photos is the natural light that's beaming in, and I think that's such an important part of therapy, of a feeling of being in somewhere that's therapeutic. And then as far as green spaces go, I mean, I can look around our current campuses. I wish we had more of it, frankly, and there's an opportunity to have that. Right now, we have the Healing Garden at Olette campus. It's a popular area, but again, it's not the largest space. And if you have for the population that we're considering, I think you'd want a much larger space and much more green area. There's a little bit of that at Met campus, but I think there's an opportunity here to do so much more.
And I think the important thing to note too is that, again, stage 2 planning really is talking about the space available in this facility and how do we carve that up and where do we put things. And a lot of this part of the conversation, a lot of the fun stuff, a lot of the stuff that will really make an impact, including, once we have these public spaces, what do they look like on the inside? What colors are they? What is the landscaping going to be like outside? That comes down the road. So when we say your feedback is important to us and you see that schedule there, this is happening quickly, but the conversation doesn't end here. The planning doesn't end here. That's going to go on for several years still. So your feedback is important and please continue to provide that. I'm going to go now to a question from Audrey. Audrey, thank you for joining us tonight. She wants to know, she says a hospital is a very scary place to go for anyone. So you need to feel at home and you need to feel comfortable. How do you plan to make people feel at ease? And I know that we've all talked in bits about this tonight, but let's start with Jeff Gemmell, because I know that you've thought a bit about this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think in the videos that we heard from some of the other patients this week, they brought up very similar kind of comments. And I think it comes back to the first impression that Mark talked about when you arrive. And we're looking at right from that first step, looking at having covered entryways, right? So it's easier for people coming in. And then when you come in, what Steve and Paul just talked about, having those open areas with bright light, seating available for patients and families. And then one model we're looking at is having a volunteer greeters reception right at the front lobby. And that first impression is somebody, a physical person coming up to you to welcome you and to offer you assistance. And I think that would make a big difference for a lot of people. It eliminates some of that anxiety. It eliminates some of that unknown. There's somebody there if you need help getting a wheelchair, if you need directions to get somewhere, they could even help walk you there or bring you in your wheelchair. That assistance and that first impression, I think, is going to bring people to ease. We're also looking at navigation and making it easier for people to navigate throughout the building and finding different unique ways to do that to help people alleviate the anxiety of not knowing where they're going or how to get there. I guess another piece that might ease people's burden a little bit is, I know I heard from a lot of people around the privacy piece, and we touched on it a little bit in the beginning. I think Monica spoke about separating front and back of the house patient elevators from service elevators. And I think going into the hospital, people coming in for procedures, knowing they're going to be in Johnny shirts and in a stretcher being wheeled around, having that comfort of knowing that you're going to have that privacy and that dignity, I hope puts people a little bit more at ease coming in. So those are some of the things we've considered so far. I'm sure I've forgotten a few, but those are the things, Allison, that we really want to hear from the community. Those are the things that I think people can tell us. These are things that would really help me feel more comfortable coming into the hospital, and we can look for ways to try to incorporate that into the design.
Thanks, Jeff. And it is, again, a really great opportunity to look at so many different things going forward. Monica or Mark, do you have anything to add to that? It was a pretty general question, but a good opportunity.
Well, I'll start. I guess Jeff made that was great points there. I think for us that work in the hospital, often we take it for granted how easy it may be to get from point A to point B. And so I think it's really important to hear from the community in terms of what they need to see in the new hospital to make it appealing, warming, and inviting for them to come to our facility. A number of us have been able to attend new recent hospital builds, and you could see what it could look like, but it's the patients, the community's input that's really key in terms of what we need to provide to the greater Windsor-Essex community for this new hospital. So anything we can do to remove that anxiety from the patients, and I think is our main goal going forward as part of this project. Monica?
Yes, first I just wanted to comment about the importance of light, and I just had a quick comment. I know we're going to get a lot of feedback from our community, but we've already learned from our patients who are in the hospital. We have many requests from patients. They want to move to the other side of the room so that they can be beside the window. So that just tells you how important it is to have light for these patients. And so that's something we've learned just from, the daily work that we do every day, but that is really critical. The other thing is one of the other areas I look after is screening, and it's been very eye-opening because we have all our patients coming in sort of at the same time. And just to echo what Mark said, that is, they're coming in, they're anxious, they're usually not coming to the hospital for a good reason. And then a lot of them, English is not their first language. And then, people are moving them through and saying, just go down this hallway, up these 3 stairs, turn right, turn left, turn. That's something that we know is critical that we need to do for our patients and for the community as well, because hospitals are a scary place. Many people don't want to be in a hospital. And so that needs to be one of our goals, is we need to be a place where you want to go to, not necessarily because you're ill or you have an injury, but it's a pleasant place to be. And that's what we really need to work towards, because it can be very scary. And then when you don't know where you're going and you're lost and English is not your first language, we've got to make sure that we tackle that so that doesn't happen.
Yeah, one other thing, we've talked a lot about coming into the hospital. One of the things the team has talked about is when the patient's being discharged, being able to set up an exit point where the family member can sort of bring their loved one to that particular spot and then very easily go get their car and then get them into the vehicle and leave. So that's top of mind as well.
And I think Paul has something to add here as well.
Yeah, Allison, I just wanted to add to what Monica was sharing there in terms of signage. And Steve had made the point earlier as well about wayfinding. And I think from some of the images that Faith shared with us, this evening of new hospitals, it actually goes beyond very effective signage. And we use the term intuitive wayfinding. when you walk into these new hospitals, they're so open, you know immediately where the elevators are, the public elevators. You can almost see them from the front door. It's very intuitive. And Faith commented on this Main Street concept that runs through the hospital and probably joins the emergency department, the cancer center, the ambulatory clinics, you know, back to the main lobby. So the building, if it's designed well with from the front door experience, the main lobby, and this Main Street concept running through it, it becomes a building that is intuitive. And that's what we need. We don't want to rely on signage, you know, entirely. And a person should be able to walk into that building and really find their way, you know, easily, find the elevators, you know, quickly. And so that's, you know, I think one of the overriding objectives of, you know, the public spaces is to make that space, you know, navigable in a very intuitive kind of way.
That makes sense. And there is a comment here. Someone says, how about signs like at the airport where people can read messages and change in different languages? And they list a number of languages. But what you're saying is, you know, as much as possible, look for ways that that's not even necessary, because you won't even need to read about it, because it'll just be right in front of you when you need it.
We'll have that. We'll have our cell phones. We'll have maps on our cell phones. We'll have all of that technology, but you're absolutely right. We shouldn't have to rely on that.
And I'm going to repeat, one of the patient reps said 2 nights ago, and I think I've repeated it every night since then, easy and convenient. Those are the 2 things that she wants in a new hospital. And I think that is a theme through almost everything that we've mentioned so far today. I had a question here that looked like it would be a question for Monica, but it has disappeared. But the question was, will there be 3 sets of elevators then? 1 for patients, 1 for staff, and 1 for goods?
I think maybe Paul should answer that question. Sorry.
Monica, we won't share with people that we want a food service elevator.
Yes,
right?
yes.
That's an internal joke, folks. Sorry about that. I had to make that. But no, indeed, they're really the front of house elevators, as Monica, I think, described very well in her response a while ago. Those public elevators up front that you can take up to an inpatient unit or up to, you know, a floor for either visiting or for accessing a clinical service. And then there's the back of house elevators that we would sort of describe or qualify as logistics elevators, mainly for distribution of food, materials, recyclable materials coming back out, even garbage, as Monica pointed out, but also elevators that are back of house that are for transporting patients. So yes, really looking at, you know, 3 different types of elevators. We're not quite yet into, of course, the very detailed elevator studies by specialists that do that kind of work to get to tell us, you know, how many will we have of each. But it's important that they be different elevators, right? So that we can separate the patient, you know, flow from, say, an inpatient unit down to a clinical area for a procedure and then back up. The days of putting that patient into the only elevator you have, and oh, there's room for 2 more people to get on, and like you said, it could be your neighbor. Those days are over. And in new hospitals, the systems are just not like that. And we, of course, have to make sure that we have enough capacity in the logistics elevators to really move all of the materials. And you would know very well, Monica, in terms of, you know, at food prep time and distribution time, they've got to move quickly. And so we'll be really looking at those flows in great detail to arrive at the right combination of elevators to move materials, food, staff, back of house.
it's been mentioned a couple times that you could get stuck on the elevator with your neighbor. And I have to say that having been on the elevators many times at the hospital since I started working here, like your neighbor is one of the better things you could be on the elevator with on some days. I quite like my neighbor, but still, it's still better than fighting the laundry cart or other things on the elevator. We'll just leave it at that. A couple comments here. We have one from Paul who said, just as one uses maps to plan a trip, it would be nice to plan our trip to the hospital with the use of a map application of the hospital and its services. I know, Steve, that's something that you've looked at and something that definitely the new hospital provides opportunities to look further into. Also, somebody else mentioned not everyone has access to technology, which of course is true. And so all of these things have to be considered when you're looking at wayfinding. Some of the hospitals I know use color coding for wayfinding, or I've been to hospitals where there were different animals for different areas just visually. And it is really neat, all of the different options and trends that are out there. Mark, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, just following up on the technology comment. I mean, the interesting point is, I mean, we're still so many years away, maybe 6-7 years away. Technology is still going to evolve over time. So it's going to be very interesting what's going to be available. And I think that's where we have the undertaking to ensure we have the most up-to-date technology when we open those new doors. So I think that's going to be part of the fun part. And I think we will be mindful of those that, to that question, that doesn't have the smartphone of today to be able to have that map on it, but we still be able to provide them the necessary directions to get to where they need to go.
And we are running out of questions that are related to tonight's topic, but there is one last question here that I think that we can close on. And it is a very short question from David, but it's one that I hear a lot of people talking about. And it may not be directly related to this stage of planning, but the question is integration of public art, ? Does anybody want to, maybe Faith? I knew Paul wants to. I'm trying to save your voice, but Paul?
I'll start.
Save it because you're going to close at the end too.
I'll start, Paul, and then you can finish. But certainly that's a key theme through from other hospitals and its integration of art and things that represent the local community. And I was just kicking myself because I'd mentioned to another group a couple of weeks ago that there were some beautiful examples of Indigenous art in one of the new CAMH buildings, Center for Addiction and Mental Health, where they had integrated that into the lobby. And I wish I would have brought a picture of that tonight. But so that's just one example. Over to you, Paul.
Well, that's a great example, Faith. And yeah, I was waving my hand there because I think art is just so important to create that experience, to create that welcoming experience. And if you can see yourself, and your community, when you walk into that lobby and the art speaks to you, all of our communities, then I think that's what we ideally want to achieve. And so when it comes to art, it's not a haphazard approach. It's a very strategic, thoughtfully planned out. It's really an art program for the whole hospital, for the public areas, for waiting rooms, for patient rooms, getting right down to the details, because art and music and natural light and the view out your window, all of those things have an impact on, the healing process. And we want to pay attention to those details as we move forward. We're not there yet, as you pointed out, Allison, but we're anxious to get there, because that will be really putting the finishing touches on, the patient and the family experience, which is really what we're focused on.
Absolutely. And being in this role, I've had the opportunity to travel to several different new hospitals, and the art is always something that jumps out at you. And it's something that is so different in their approach to it at each of the hospital areas. And often it really says a lot about the community that the hospital is based in, but it has been striking in all of them. Steve?
Yeah, just quickly, Allison, something I wanted to emphasize was just how much the art goes noticed, even at the current campuses. In fact, last week we had the mother of an autistic child that spoke to us and asked where she could find, or even, exchange for a donation to the foundation, purchase a piece of art that her son found so calming inside the hospital. So I don't think we can underestimate the therapeutic value of art. And the fact that we've got plans for, even in the existing campuses, we have plans for Indigenous art for some of our boardrooms that we'll talk about in the next few weeks. And, so there's lots of opportunities there. And I know it's not a main part of the conversation tonight, but a very important element, and I'm glad it was raised tonight.
And you can see how excited everybody got about that topic. So I think that is something to look forward to. And David, thank you for the great question. And a great question to close us out on tonight. But before we leave, I will check back in with our panelists to see if there's anything we missed tonight. Another great conversation. But is there anything anyone would like to add? Monica, you just unmuted yourself. Was that...
Well, no, I just wanted to say that I hope that we get a lot of engagement from the community, because this is so exciting, like to have the opportunity to build something from the ground up. And this is the public spaces. So this is where we really want the community's input and your engagement in this process, because this is not a patient care area where we have very strict guidelines. This is something where we want your input so that we can do what you want. So I'm really excited to hear what all the great comments that everyone's going to have and suggestions.
Excellent. Thanks, Monica. Anybody else? Just wave if you've got anything else to say, but I know that we've had a lot of great input tonight. All right. So then that brings us to the end of the final town hall of the Together We Build series. I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight and everybody who took part over the past 3 weeks. Anyone who joined us as a panelist, anyone who joined us as a guest, thank you. We've had some really exciting conversations about what the future is going to look like and how it will benefit patients, how it will benefit staff, and the wider community. We hope you've enjoyed this opportunity to meet some members of the planning team, including our hospital staff, expert planners, and patient representatives. And we hope we've given you a sense of what's happening with some of the key areas of planning and what comes next, and also where you can go to share your thoughts and ideas with these teams. So if you haven't already, one last plug. I know I've been saying the same thing for 11 days straight. Please visit our engagement site, togetherwebuild.wrh.on.ca. Continue this conversation. We invite you to post your ideas, take our surveys, ask any questions that you still have. And this site will remain live for at least 1 month after the town halls, probably longer than that. But after that, what we're going to do is summarize the results and share them with the planning teams. So your input will help guide decision-making throughout the process. So again, please take the time to share your thoughts. And later this year, we're going to do this all again. So you will have a chance to see how things have progressed, see how your ideas and how your input has been used in the planning. So thank you very much. And I want to thank tonight's panel guests. We're so fortunate to have you all with us tonight, keeping us up to date on the process and plans for the new hospital. And we look forward to seeing the progress. So for the final word of the night, we are going to go back to Paul Landry. He hasn't been as quiet as I thought he was going to be, but Paul, you've been with us for most of this series, so close us out here.
Well, thank you, Allison. And I want to echo what Monica said. It's a very exciting time, and this is an exciting topic. The public areas and this first experience, as Jeff referred to it, walking through the front doors is very important. When you're a patient or you're a relative, a family member, and you're anxious and you're walking through those front doors, we want to create an environment that is the welcoming and calming. And so I think we've had a good conversation tonight. I think we've had good conversations over the other 10, town hall meetings over the last couple of weeks. I would like to thank the community participants that have joined us in these conversations. Thank all of the panelists over the 11 nights. I want to thank our host, who's put a lot of work into this and who has called us in for questions. And so, Allison, thank you for your efforts in hosting us. A special thanks to our patient representatives. Don't have one on this in this group yet, but we've had 15 patient representatives on these 38 functional program user groups that are giving of their time and giving of their ideas in these conversations that we're having at the planning tables with our expert consultants from Agnew Peckham. And Monica, when you said, I hope we hear more from the public. I hope we hear more from our community. I want to share a few little stats tonight as we close out our first round of these 11 town hall meetings. We've had over 300 community participants at these meetings. We've had 2,520 plus people visit the website since we launched it at the beginning of March. 10 town halls held with 324 people attending live, an additional 478 views on YouTube. 43 members of the planning team and user groups have participated in the town halls, including 13 of our 15 patient representatives. 91 questions, not including the ones from this evening, so we probably hit 100, have been answered through the town halls, and another 19 on the project site. 138 surveys have been completed, and 40 ideas, must be more than that this evening for sure, have been shared on the engagement platform. So a big thank you to everyone who has participated. We look forward to going back to the planning table next week for the next 3 weeks, and then the final round of functional programming in the month of May, and a final document in June, and then having our architects onboarded this summer. So looking forward to the next round of town hall meetings in the fall. So thank you. Thank all the panelists and the participants.
And thank you, Paul. Thank you for really bringing it tonight, even though I know that it was not easy. We appreciate that and everything that you've done throughout the town hall series. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night, and please visit the website. We'll see you back here in the fall. Cheers.
Thank you.